I think that there is a secret sauce that we have, and I think there's something that we do that's not easily duplicatable. And
the hardest part is figuring out what you want to master.
Focus on your product.
Can you tell somebody that they suck?
You gotta just go, this is exactly what I want to do for a living.
You can't even tell somebody that their breath is life.
You know, what's funny is all the little like learning things, right? Is like I do an intro separately, like after you leave. Yeah.
So you have some sense.
Yeah. And then I do my little like, go to youngandreckless.com and blah, blah, blah. And so what I kept doing was I kept doing an intro, but then when the guest would get here, I'd do another intro, and there's,
that
just the little annoying things you have to learn.
I didn't realize like this, you have a clothing brand too. What's your demo?
Mainly male, like 18 to 24.
Okay, because I have a 13-year-old son, and he's very into like Supreme and like all that shit.
He'd probably like it.
I know when I was looking around, I was like, my son would have like, he'd be in heaven here.
Yeah, and it's called Young and Reckless, so I'm sure he can fit the brand.
Yeah. Well, he's like bigger than me now.
Yeah,
he wears like a size 11 shoe. He's so big, and I don't know where he gets it. My husband and I are very short. So
is he gonna play basketball?
He plays basketball.
Does he?
Mm-hmm.
Does he do good?
He's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, he's tall. He picks me up when he hugs me now.
Really?
Yeah, it's so weird.
That's so cool. That has to be the craziest like thing. Seeing a human being like grow up.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I mean, I literally am like, I was just like nursing you like a week ago. What happened?
Yeah.
It's really, and then it's like 5 more years and he's out. He's like,
it's so quick.
The worst.
Is he already like planning for college and all that?
He also like wants to be a rapper.
Really?
He's like full on, like he's got long hair right now. It's like in braids, and he'll leave it for like and bleach blonde, and
That's
he like
sick.
writes his own song. We found him like a producer who helps him like. I felt really stupid whenever I say this, but like lay down the tracks
that's the lingo.
Like he's laying down the tracks. But he sits in like on his computer and he makes music for hours and he writes. That's like the only thing he really loves in school is English.
Yeah.
And so he writes these songs and they sound just like, like Little Pump and Little Skies. I don't know if you know those guys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't
Look
know
at you.
them
You're hip. You're so hip.
I mean, I'm 13. I'm like, tell me, Grant, but he just even appreciates music. Like he's like, I love Taylor Swift, which he doesn't, but he's like, he appreciates the production of her music and how good it is because he understands production now. So it's really neat. And so that's what he wants to do and wants to get face tattoos and all that shit.
He does. Oh, shit. That's what I was going to ask you, right? Because face tattoos, not only is white rappers, is your husband white?
He is, and also it's so funny because my husband has like for years and years wanted tattoos. He's also like the branding guy at Drybar, and he's like the creative.
Yeah.
And he's so creative that you would have thought he always had tattoos.
Yeah.
But he didn't for a long time because he was like always working for somebody else until he had his own business.
Yeah.
And we started Drybar. Now he has his own agency, which is a whole other story. But he like just went on like a tattoo rampage, and he went from having none to he's got like 16 now.
That's
in like a 3-week.
That's so sick.
Which of course my sons are like, Dad is the coolest. Yes, they love it. And Grant's like, when do I get to get a tattoo? I'm like, you have to wait.
Damn it. And how old's your husband?
We're both 43.
That is so
he'll be
cool.
43.
I'm such a fan of like at 40 years old being like, fuck it, I'm getting a bunch of tats.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's so funny because he's such a creative and so like a branding guy. Like he photoshopped them onto him before he got them. So you can see him, and he even got.
That's a real branding guy.
He really got He even got the printer that the tattoo artists have.
Yeah.
Because you know how they print out the thing and then they put it on you, and then they basically. So he got that, so he could put them on his body before they were actual tattoos.
That's so smart.
It's smart.
You know what's funny is that sounds like such a no-brainer, and I've never heard of anyone doing that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the printer was like $150. He was like, "This is a great investment." He's like, "Let's just print it out and see how it looks." I'm like, "Can you start doing that for me?" Because I have a few, but he's like. Gone off the deep end.
That's incredible. That's so cool. Imagine what I was saying is because white rappers are no longer like it's no longer strange.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like the whole young white rapper with pink hair and face tats is like the new norm.
Oh my God,
what if your son becomes a great white rapper?
I mean, I'd be stoked.
Would you?
If he like really. If he ever listens or watches, he'll kill me. He hates like when I talk about him. But he and also, by the way, I always want to like he's got. If you go to Spotify, I think it is.
Yeah, Spotify.
No, SoundCloud.
Okay.
SoundCloud. Yep. You can actually find his music and whatever.
What's his name? Can we shout him out?
Yeah, He just changed it. It used to be that's the fucking annoying thing. He keeps changing his name. I'm like, Grant,
you got to get it right.
You got it. Yeah. So it used to be. I think he changed it to. Oh my God, Mari, you have to look it up. Because
yeah, we got to give him the proper
because
shout out.
I feel like he's gonna kill me for it. Like he's changed it to like, something millennial. There's not little.
There's no Lil?
Ask Cam. Cam will know what it is.
So,
he just changed it.
we'll
But anyways,
shout
I
it
would
out.
be like, and he's like, really, I mean, he's 13. And if you remember when you were 13, like I wanted to be a professional tennis player when I was 13. I lived in Florida. But if you think about that time, I mean, you certainly don't want your parents like being a dream crusher and being like, no, you're not going to do that. I'm not okay with that. Especially from two parents who didn't go to college and, didn't take a traditional path.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd be stoked if he became a famous rapper.
Yeah,
And he's
you're
like,
right.
I'm going to be more famous than you one day, Mom. I'm like, well, I'm not very famous. So, because the thing I was
cool.
going to say is that I want to always, if you go to his Instagram page, you can easily get to his music. But I always say, like, why don't I put some of your music on my page?
Yeah.
Because I have more followers, more people will just hear you and
Yeah.
maybe discover you. And he's like, I don't want people to ever say, I made it because of my mom.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's a
Such a
tricky
good kid,
situation.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, I get it. Do it on your own. Although
That's
now
so
I've just
cool.
ruined all that.
That's okay. We'll say I did it. And
Yeah.
listen, I don't want
It
to
used
take
to,
credit.
his name used to be like Zyga or something, and now it's. But like who's the rapper that just died?
XXX Tentacion.
I still can't say that
Yeah,
name.
I know.
He was like depressed for like 2 weeks.
I know a lot of kids. My friend's son was like that.
I was like, I mean, to the point where like I couldn't even like really, I couldn't console him. I couldn't talk to him. He wanted to be himself. He kept on going on like Instagram lives and these like sad.
And like talking to the people.
Yes, and he was like, and he like made his Instagram profile pic X's pic. I mean, he was like, and I was like, Grant, I don't know much about him, but I feel like he did some bad stuff, that guy, and he was like, he did, Mom, but he was like really trying to make up for it. And he was donating all this money to charity. And the reason he was even in Broward County was because of this charity he was doing. So, my son was like giving him the benefit of the doubt of like trying to better himself.
I'll tell you this, whatever he did, X, because I listened to like some of his music and stuff. And of course I get it, but like I'm not 14, but whatever he did, kids just like latched onto. It was like Tupac dying is what they compared it to for those young kids.
Because did you hear about the thing like Fairfax? They did like the memorial service for him, and it was like a madhouse.
Yeah.
Of course, my son was there.
He went.
My husband took him because he asked me to take him. I'm like, that's not my scene, but you go with Dad.
Yeah, it looked crazy.
And my husband like dropped him and like came. He was in the area, but just kind of let him like navigate through it.
You
But
got
we're
to.
also
You guys
really
are
like
cool
laid
parents.
back.
Yeah,
My
you're
parents
so
were
cool.
But Cameron, my husband, grew up Mormon, so he grew up in this very like suppressed and different kind of environment where my dad was like smoked pot all the time, and my parents were just really laid back and liberal. And when Cameron met my parents, he was like, "Wow, this is how I want to." I want in this family. This is how I want to be with my kids. And so, we're really laid back. But I think, I mean, God, knock on wood, so far so good. My kids have like pretty good values. They're good kids. Like we just literally left, like trying to figure out where Grant's going to go to high school, this placement meeting, and they were like, he's one of the most respectful kids I know.
Really?
And I was like, what? Score.
Look at him. He's a jack of all trades.
Good parenting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's a good kid.
Where are you from? Southern California?
No, I was born in New York.
Got it.
But I grew up in in South Florida. And then I moved to New York City and lived there all of my 20s, and then met my husband in New York, and we moved west.
Got it.
years ago.
So how old were you when you moved out in New York?
Well, I feel like I lived in New York really pretty much all of my 20s. I went back and forth a little bit to South Florida, but then I was practically in New York all of my 20s.
Got it.
We met when I was like 27 and then got married and then moved.
And was your whole childhood was really in Florida?
Pretty much, yeah.
Got it.
Which really informed a lot of Drybar because it was like, moisture in the air, humidity everywhere that I had to like, I could never, my hair was always like a crazy frizzy mess that I had to like figure out how to.
It's funny how those little
deal with
things
it.
like kind of steer like what ends up
And then
becoming.
you don't think
know what I
about
mean?
it. Yeah.
Why did your family move to Florida?
It was my parents were ultimately entrepreneurs, but my dad moved my dad moved us there because we had lived in Atlanta. We didn't love it there, and my dad's dad maybe connected him to a job.
Uh-huh.
God, I don't remember.
It just kind of you just kind of
I don't
ended up
remember
there.
why we moved to Florida. I just remember that. I mean, I was also really young when we did.
Yeah.
So I don't totally remember
And
why.
what about like did you have brothers and sisters or no?
I have an older brother. My brother is my business partner in Drybar.
Yep.
And we've always been super duper close. My parents will tell you that he raised me.
Yeah.
You know, we had that kind of relationship. He was very protective of me from the get-go.
And what else? Because I'm so fascinated by like how parents and that stuff affect like later choices and kind of direction.
Yeah.
Like you said, your parents were super sort of liberal and whatever, but like what else? Like were they working a lot? Like how, you know what I mean? What was that like environment like?
Well, they always worked a lot, but what I remember most was Flips, which was my parents' business. So we grew up in South Florida, like Boca Raton, Delray Beach. My parents opened. My dad had the idea to open like what they called like the schmata business, which was like older ladies' clothing.
Yeah.
And so my dad opened this business in like little old lady shopping centers where like they would take the trolley over during the day, and there was really no place for these like women to shop for like cuter clothes. It was an old lady clothes, and there was the mall, which they hated going to. So my dad opened this store called Flips. It was like an instant success. And so my mom came to work for my mom, I think was working for like AT&T or something at the time. So so both of my parents had never been really entrepreneurs up to that point, but they started Flips. It was a wild success, and that's like that's what I remember most about my childhood is everything. Every conversation was always about Flips. My parents were always talking about the business.
That's so cool.
That's how we grew up. And they used to make us like come to the stores and like clean up and sweep the floors, and we would just kind of hang out there because it was my parents' business. And my brother and I, you know, just again, it wasn't something we realized we were learning at the time, but we watched my dad, like, and how he would take care of like the husbands and set up chairs for them and bring them orange juice and coffee and the newspaper, so they would sit there longer while their wives shopped. So there were so many things that my parents did that really all these years later informed how we run our business.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so cool. I just feel like you see it a lot when like you have entrepreneurial parents.
Yeah.
I just think there's something about a kid seeing that you don't have to follow the normal path that's like so important. You know?
And it's like, it's funny how I felt like this with my parents growing up. My parents were always like, everybody was always at my house because my house was like, my parents were so easygoing. They had like all the junk food. Like everybody loved being at our house. And I've noticed that with my son's friends too. Like we're just not conventional. We don't have a lot of rules. We're very like trusting of our kids. And, you know, I don't know, maybe to a fault, and parenting is hard, and you know, everybody should do what feels right to them. But for us, it's like we're very laid back, but our kids know how hard we work. And that's something, a value that I certainly got from my parents, so did my brother, where we were like, you want nice things and you want a nice life, you have to work for them. No one hands you that shit, you know? You really have to go for it, which is funny because when my kids, even with like going back to the rappers, like...
Did we get a name yet?
See, that's it.
Maximum Z on SoundCloud, right?
Yes.
Okay, Maximum Z is that like a Gen Z reference?
I don't think so.
Okay, Maximum. What was his original name?
Original was like Little UFO. He was really into UFOs for a while.
He was a little.
It was Lil.
And then he grew up.
And then he grew into Zyga. And then it became, what is it again? And it's not spelled like you think it's spelled either. I was like, why did you spell it wrong? And he's like, because it was taken.
You got to. It's much cooler.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone go on SoundCloud and check out Maximum Z. We're trying to get him to face tats ASAP.
Well, you know, it's funny. My husband wanted to get tattoos like right here on his like knuckles, and someone was like, "Oh, dude, that's a jaw blocker."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah,
I think he's okay."
Yeah, I don't know about you. I was like, "You could get Alli Webb. That would be cool."
That fits.
But he says getting anything about me tattooed on him is the kiss of death for our marriage. Are you married?
No.
Well, when you.
But I don't know that I.
I
think if it's your wife, right? If it's your wife.
But that's the thing. It's like meaning it's going to be forever. That you're like, it's like reverse psychology. I don't know. He's real weird about that. Although he said he's going to get one that says, "Don't poke the bear."
What's that?
In honor of me.
Because you're the bear.
Because I can be. Well, he's like, if you fuck with you in certain times, it's like you don't poke. Like he thinks I get really fiery sometimes. Which
that'd be a good one.
Yeah, because then
reminder.
It's like, yeah.
Let me ask you this: what kind of paint the picture for me of what you were like in middle school, high school. Like, what were you into? What were your like music?
Memory lane.
Yeah.
I feel like I was very. It's funny because we just had my dad on our podcast, and hearing my dad talk about us as kids is kind of funny because you don't think about that stuff that much anymore. And he was like, you were always really quiet. And my brother and my dad were a little more combative. And he said, I used to just sit back and kind of watch them fight and just like not say anything. And I think I was quiet as a kid. I think it took me, I think I'm a very outspoken, confident person now, but it took me a long time to get to that. And as a kid, I think I was like, just kind of like watching everybody else and, you know, trying to figure myself out. I mean, I loved like high school for the social aspect of it. You know, I think I enjoyed that piece of it so much. I wasn't like a great student, but I liked.
What type of grades?
Like B's and C's.
Yeah. Just kind of got through.
I got through. And honestly, I'm sure a lot of people say this, in retrospect, I wish I had like applied myself more, because I feel like there's things that I wish I knew that I don't. That I feel like, you know, I mean, my parents always said things to me like, you're really street smart, like you're a bright girl. But, you know, if I was going to, you know, I did like the SATs and all that kind of stuff like that. It was not, that was bad news for me. And my, you know, my kids are the same way. They're not test takers, but they're smart, and they are. And I say that to them too. And they think it's just me like giving them a cop out. But I'm like, it's a real thing. Like you're a smart kid. You can read people. You understand a room. Like that's not something that you're kind of born with that. And
not to sound, this sometimes sounds a little arrogant. I don't mean it to, but you can hire book smarts.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You can't hire.
It's a much more like rare like skill to have to be able to do that kind of stuff versus So I mean, I think that in retrospect, I wish I had like, you know, paid more attention to school. Like for some reason, like history, I feel like I should know more about things that happened in the world that I don't.
You can just read some books for that. Do you read a lot or no?
I don't really. I'm not a big reader, and it's ironic because my mom read like crazy. I think obviously we live in a very different generation, but in the last couple of years, especially everything that's going on with politics, I feel like I listen to CNN around the clock just because I feel like I have to.
I had to stop.
No, I know.
I used to go home every day and turn it on just out of habit.
Well, I listen in my car. I know it's a little depressing.
It just makes you feel like the world's burning down every day.
I know.
And you realize that if you stop for like a month, you're like,
you miss so much.
Oh, like I know, but you're also like, oh, like I didn't.
You're
like,
okay.
My world was fine. My world didn't collapse.
The thing about me is like I never, ever, ever listened to the news for my whole life. I was like, I don't like it. It's depressing. I don't want to listen to it. And honestly, I think it wasn't. We lived in New York City during 9/11, and I think that was really, truly the first time I'd ever watched the news because I was living in this city and this crazy thing happened. You know, and we watched it like religiously for weeks, for months, and then finally I was like, we have to stop. Like it's just too depressing. And then I don't think I did for a long time until. You know, I think it's also with having kids and like, it just makes me nervous, like the situation we're in and the influences that are on my kids now. And so it's.
What do they say? It's just curious. How old are your kids? 13 and what?
11.
And what's their take on? Like, do they feel the general like anxiety in the world? I
think they do a little. And maybe it's our fault. And because, you know, we were kind of into this election and we were, you know, talking to them a lot about how we felt about it. And they're very, very liberal kids. Like, you know, they're very like, they don't see color in people. They, you know, they don't care if you're gay or straight. Like they just don't see that kind of stuff. So for them, it's like, they understand that like they're getting to the age where they understand that people are racist and people, you know, and so that is like, you can tell that they're like troubled by that. And also, I think it affected my younger son a little bit more with like all the shootings in schools, like that 100% stressed him out. And I think they see like how much it affects me and how like emotional I get about it and how I like, you know, start going to these rallies and I'm donating all this money and I'm doing all this stuff that, and we're very transparent with our kids. We tell our kids everything and, you know, and talk to them about everything. And of course they just hear about the shootings and they hear about that stuff and they're scared. I mean, they're legit scared.
I can't imagine. Because you're smart, you're not dumb, and you know, like I keep thinking, like, oh, they're kids, maybe they don't know, but like when you're 13, like you know what's going on. You can see on the news that people are like getting shot in these schools,
and they were they were glued, and it's all over, you know, social media. So they were glued to like they were watching all these videos of all these kids, and you know, on the one hand, I think they were like impressed with the kids who were speaking out and doing all of that, you know, and they the marches, and they wanted to go outside their schools and do the marches when they did the walkouts and all that. They felt you know prideful about that they wanted to, you know, and but I think there's a part of them it's like doesn't understand it. Like, why do people do this? And then it leads to conversations about like mental health and how we talk to our kids and we're like, you got to talk about the things that are upsetting you. And I mean, with my 11-year-old, this is such an embarrassing thing if he ever hears this, but I'm like, it's like an emotional poop. You just have to get it out, you know?
That's good.
Because I'm like, listen, if you don't go to the bathroom for days, like you get a stomach ache, you don't feel good, you're bloated, blah, it's all bad. I'm like, it's the same thing with your emotions. If you don't like get that shit out.
You should write like a children's book called Brain Poop.
Well, it's amazing the things that you learn when you're like sitting there talking to your kid and you're like, you know something's wrong and there's like emotional and they're, you know, and you're like, how do I make this like work for your level so you understand? And he did. And now it's like become a joke. My husband the other day was like, I told Kid that he needed an emotional poop. And I was like,
time to
I'm really
poop.
proud of that.
So good. Man, that's cool. Okay, so let me ask you this. Because you're like, you obviously have this, I'm sure you hear this a lot, but a lot of confidence, right? And you have this sort of this energy, but you said in high school or whatever, you were more shy and whatever. Is there anything that you can point to where that came from? Or did it just come from growing and learning and achieving?
I think it came from, I wish I could tell you where it came from. I think it came from growing and learning and achieving and like, you know, maybe from like this whole, you know, it's like the women empowerment and like, you know, feeling like, I mean, I guess for me starting, as I got older and out into the workplace, and I think a lot of this was the foundation my parents gave me, not only from like watching them run their business, but like that they kind of believed in me and whatever I did, whatever I wanted to do, they were like, sure, give it a try. Yeah. Even though I was also like on the flip side of that, like kind of the underachiever of the family, where my brother was like, my brother was more book smart, and they were like, you know, Michael's going to do great things. You know, hopefully Alli marries well.
Yeah. That's kind of how it was with me and my brother. My brother was just like graduated high school a year early, went to college.
Yeah, my brother was so the overachiever. Like, I don't know if you remember we used to call him Alex P. Keaton, that show.
Oh yeah, what is that?
Family Ties, maybe? Yep. Is that it? Mari, that's way before your time.
No.
But it was a good show. And Michael J. Fox was like this overachieving kid that was like, and that was so my brother. Yeah. And I was like, again, it's just in the background. But I guess, you know, to answer your question, I think it was as I got into the world, you know, I got most jobs that I applied for. And I excelled at most jobs that I applied for. And I think that was like my parents like teaching me how to like treat your business, every job like it's your own. That was like my philosophy. I remember like my first job in high school, I worked at like a retail clothing store in the mall, and I remember them being like, you gotta like chill out, you're making us look bad. Because to me it was like, oh, I just am working hard because that's all I know. So I guess it was like a series of those things happening, and I jumped around, but I was pretty like successful in everything that I did. And I think over time that confidence just started to build and build. And then when we started Drybar, and it was such a success, and you know, we like accidentally like changed an industry and all this shit happened, I was like, look at me. Yeah, now, you know?
Now you're good. Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah.
Did you go to college?
Like for a half a second.
Really?
Well, because I lived in South Florida, and all my friends were either going to like FSU or UF. So I went barely to FSU. And again, it was more of like the social part of it.
And did you even have like a...
No, I didn't.
You're just like, this is what I'm supposed to do, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't go to class that much. Like I was like, this is so not like my place. And also I think what happens to a lot of kids when they go to college was like, it's like freedom, and they go a little bit crazy and they're drinking or whatever. And like, I grew up in this house where it was like, my parents were like, if you're going to drink, just call us so you don't drive. And so going to college wasn't like going to be like this whole new world for me. So I was just kind of like, meh.
Yeah, I get it. And then that's when you moved to New York?
I didn't have a major. Yeah, so I remember coming back and being just very lost and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I just decided I just wanted to move to New York. And I moved to New York on like, you know, with nothing and knowing nobody.
Did you remember it from being younger? Or?
Because my parents always took us to New York, and we always take our kids to New York.
And
too,
you loved it.
And I loved it.
Really?
I was like, this is the greatest place ever. And there was so much culture and diversity, and like it was magical to me as a kid that I was like, I was like chomping at the bit to get to New York. And I wanted to work in fashion at that time. So I was like, that was what I was going to do. I was just going to figure it out. And my parents were supportive, and they paid for this like little teeny tiny apartment I lived in, and they like, you know, of course I got a job and all of that, but it was like they allowed me. It was like my college, really, you know.
I'm such a fan of that. Like, I don't know what I'll do when I have kids or which way I'll kind of push them, but like, I'm such a fan of if you don't feel like college is the thing for you,
Right.
like I'd rather spend the tuition money on an apartment in New York
Yeah.
to like see if you can go figure it
Right.
out. You know what I mean?
So that's so true. I mean, that's how I feel for my kids. Like I would be whatever my kids want to do,
Yeah.
would be fine with me and my husband. I think they know now, but they'll learn more. Like you should have like figure something out. Like
Yeah.
you have to get a job. We'll pay for your apartment, but we're not going to pay for you to go buy like Supreme
Yeah.
clothes. Like you got to figure that shit out.
Yeah, the record's got to sell.
Yeah.
Maximum Z. Maximum Z.
Maximum Z.
Man. I'm so excited for him to blow up.
Oh God.
And then what did you?
He can say it all came from you.
No, I can't wait. He has to come on the podcast when he blows up.
Oh my God, that'd be so cute.
Yeah. What? So then you just went to New York, got a job. Where was your first job? Was it in fashion?
Yeah, I was working in, gosh, what was I don't even remember the order anymore. It seems like so long ago. But I worked for Nicole Miller, and that was something that my brother and I actually brought back to South Florida years later. But I also it's funny, I just posted something today about, I worked for Cynthia Raleigh. I was like the receptionist at her showroom. And I just posted something today because I had walked by her store like the other weekend and I was like, Cynthia Raleigh, because I interviewed with her to be her personal assistant because I was working at the front desk of her showroom, just greeting people. It was like it was like a receptionist job.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine told me that she was looking for a new personal assistant. And at the time, this was like 20 years ago, Cynthia Raleigh and Nicole Miller, they were like the designers at the time. And I really wanted to work for her and be her assistant. I was like, this will be the coolest job ever.
Dream job.
Like, yeah. And I completely blew the interview like I've never. It's like the
How?
one, because I think so at that point, again, it's all like so mumbled in my head, but I had been working in hair already because I had already gotten my cosmetology license and whatever. And I think I needed like a break from like the service business, and I was like an assistant forever, and that's a very like subservient job. And you're washing people's hair. I used to like walk my John Sahag, who was the owner of the salon. He had 2 big greyhounds. I used to have to walk them on Madison Avenue, which is very humiliating.
I can imagine.
But anyways, I was like, I'm going to do this. And I think I said to her in the interview, like, I don't want to be in a subservient job anymore. And I'm trying to get a job as a fucking personal assistant. And I remember like the words coming out of my mouth and being like, you just fucking blew it.
Yeah.
Like you are 100% not getting this job.
Yeah, you just walked in and said, I don't want this job.
I know. I was like, what is wrong with me? But like, what a great lesson that was to like, and I really like, I thought about it for so long after, and I like was so mad at myself. And I remember like being like, this is a lesson. Like I have to think about what I'm going to say to people before I sit down and have an interview. I have to like better prepare because I'm sure if I had like played that out in my head, I wouldn't have said that, but then, of course, on the flip side of that, which I know this sounds so cheesy and cliche, but it's like our mistakes are how we learn and all of that. And had I not, who knows what would have happened in my like trajectory of life if I had.
What I'm seeing from it is, don't you think that maybe I'm being too cheesy here, but like that you sort of said the truth.
Yeah.
At which
right.
you could be like, just some,
right. That's a good way to look at it. Because I guess on some level, I didn't want that job, even though I thought I did.
Yeah, it's almost like your destiny said, like, nope, sorry, we're not taking this one.
Yeah.
We're gonna go be a boss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's true. And again, had that job panned out and I bullshitted a little bit more, which I think is
Just
probably
saying.
a fault of a strength or a fault of mine is that I'm a pretty like honest to a fault person. That I think that just came out, but. Maybe Drybar never would have.
Yeah, it worked out. That little bit of truth might have steered you right.
Yeah.
In the right direction.
Yes. Yeah.
So then, what else were you doing in New York after that?
So
failed?
I did. I ended up working. I took a lot of different paths after New York, and for a while I was working in PR in New York because I had I was in my like early 20s, and I had other friends who were working in PR, and that job also seemed a lot more exciting than what I was doing.
Yeah, seems fun.
And because I had a couple friends who worked there, and so I ended up in PR for a while, and that was when I met my husband, and that was like a super fun job because we were working with all these musicians like Paul McCartney and Janet Jackson and Jennifer Lopez, and it was like got to go to these cool parties, and I worked hard, and I also again another like thing in my career that informed things I didn't realize because I was working for a publicist, and I was an assistant, but in a very different kind of way.
Yeah.
And I used to have to write press releases and just send like professional sounding emails, which I'd never done that.
Yeah.
So I had no formal like college degree. I never learned how to do that kind of stuff, and email was still relatively new. And so Paul Freundlich, who's the guy I worked for, he like taught me how to write, and I remember him teaching me how to be like, you know, you have to think about this differently, and he would like teach me how to like structure, you know, how to change like paragraphs. I mean, he just taught me a lot. And again, I didn't think it was at the time. I'm sure I rolled my eyes a lot, and he was a really tough boss, and he was really cranky. Even if he ever listens to this, I mean, he knows he's a cranky bear. But I learned so much, and I didn't think it even mattered at the time. And you know, then I had right around that time I met my husband, and I was 26, 27, and I really wanted. Then I was like one track mind to having babies at that point. I don't know what happened to me, but I was like, I got to find the husband. I got to have the babies.
Check.
And I met Cam, and he was like perfect, and we were like, you know, fell in love, like love at first sight. Like
Really?
it was like one of those like movie moments, and that's a kind of a funny story too. And then we ended up getting married, and I was like, start having kids, you know. Of course, he was like, really, right now? And I was like, yeah. And he always says like he always says that like I don't think I ever would have been like, okay, now's the time.
Yeah.
You know, it was me saying I think we should do this, and we should have kids.
How interesting. So at 27, you didn't have this concept or anything like it.
No.
And you were just on like living in New York, jobs, met your husband, let's have kids, but everything's happy. Like you feel life is great.
I think that you know, when looking back on it all, I feel like I've always been pretty good about like staying in a job or a situation as long as I was happy in it, you know. And I'm a big believer in that. It's actually one of like our core values at Drybar is like, you know, life is too short to work someplace lame. And I think that I always have had that kind of mentality, like, if you're not happy in what you're doing, like do something else. And that's how I felt. You know, I had done hair for a long time, and I got to the point where I was like, I'm not super happy working in a salon. Like I didn't love it anymore. So I decided to try other things. And, you know, I tried, you know, fashion and retail, and then I tried PR, and they were all like good at the time things. They were never anything that I felt like was like it, and like I felt so determined. And then there was also this like longing to have kids that I had always kind of felt this connection to. And so we first moved to San Francisco, which was a terrible year. Oh, that year.
That was the first place you moved after. So you got married and then moved to San Francisco?
We got married. We lived in New York for a couple years, and then, but we were like living in this tiny apartment. But when we had stopped, like when we first met, we were like really like partying and going out all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we were like in our early
That's what you
20s in
do.
New York
Yeah,
City. It was
yeah.
like the greatest.
Freshly
I mean, it
in
was
love,
the
just-
greatest thing ever. I mean, and we met out late one night at
So good.
a bar.
Is that a funny
called
story
Hell.
that you
It
said?
is.
Can you tell me it?
Yeah. So it's one of my favorite stories. So we were both living in New York City, and I feel like the majority of my friends when I lived in New York were like gay men. I was just somehow fell into that scene, and I've always loved the gay men. I don't know why.
I know a lot of girls that are that way.
Yeah,
There's something about the
there's just-
relationship
there's
between
something about
pretty
it.
young girls and gay men. They just really
It's
have
just
a
the
great
thing.
time. Yeah.
So my best friend Alan was my roommate, and we did everything together. And honestly, I enjoyed going out to like, not like the gay like dance places, but like the gay bars, like where it was chill, because those guys were so nice.
Yeah, girls love those
And
places.
they're so complimentary, and they're so nice, and there's no like pressure from like weird guys like hitting on you in weird ways and all that shit.
Yeah.
So I tended to do that a little bit more. And we had a couple friends who owned a little bar in the meatpacking district, which was way before it was like it is now, like literally meat hanging on the street.
Yeah.
Like, and there was like one or two like bars, and nobody really went down there. It was kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
But our friends had a little bar there named Hell, and it was like kind of the place you'd go before you went out to like the big parties and whatever and dance clubs, and then kind of the place you ended up after, because it was chill and like it was a bar, and there was like a pool table, and it was like, and these guys lived above it, so we'd end up at their apartment sometimes too. It was fun.
Yeah.
So we went there all the time, and there was this one night that Alan, and also by the way, that's when you went out at like 11 or 12 o'clock at night, which is like so crazy to me now, but we used to go out really late, and so
especially in New York.
yeah, it's just what you did.
Yeah.
And Alan one night was like, come to hell with me. And I was like, I really don't want to go, Alan. I was so tired and whatever. And he's like, just come with me. And I was like, fine. So I went with him, and we were in the bar. I mean, there was like, total side note, there was I think maybe that even the reason I went, and I'm pretty sure Cam knows this story, is that there was a really cute bartender that was straight, that was always there. So that was like my guy that I would like go and like flirt with. But this particular night, it was really crowded, and it was late because at this time it was, we didn't get there till about 12, and I think it was like maybe like 3. And from across the room, I was standing on one side of the bar, and Alan was on the other side of the bar, and this guy kind of walks up and standing next to me. And I was like, oh, he's kind of cute, but assumed he's gay because he's at the gay bar. But Alan from like across the room was like, he's straight. Like Cameron can't, it was obviously Cameron. Yeah. He couldn't see, but, this story is so much better when Cameron tells it, but Cameron turned to me and I like turned to him at like the exact same moment. And Cameron said, and I think this just like fell out of his mouth. He was like, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. It was the very first thing he ever said to me.
Very movie moment.
I know. And I swear to God, that's exactly how it happened. And now when he tells the story, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. Yeah. It was just like his instinct. And of course, like I blushed, and it was so sweet. And we just like started talking and hit it off, like went home that night together. And like basically he had a girlfriend at the time. Like the next day he went home, broke up with the girlfriend, came back to my house, and we were together.
You savage.
Every day since.
You met your husband in hell.
I know. That's what Cameron always says now, is we're a match made in hell.
Yeah, that's so good. Wow, that's good.
But disclaimer, the girlfriend was like a friend, and they were like,
fine. You're a savage. Nope, don't poke the bear. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's incredible.
So it was definitely like, God, it was so long ago. Maybe we've been married almost 15 years now.
That's so good. So then you just have crazy New York, freshly in love relationship. You get married. Is this before you're pregnant? You moved to San Francisco?
No, we moved to San Francisco. So I was working in PR, and Cameron was always in advertising. He was a creative guy. So the only real places we would live or move was like big cities with big ad agencies. So like New York, LA, San Francisco. He got a job. I was like, I'm kind of done with New York. I felt like I needed to get out. And so he was like looking for jobs. He got a job in San Francisco. And I had been to LA, but I didn't have a good sense of San Francisco.
Yep.
And if you have not really been to San Francisco,
I haven't spent real time there, so
it's a bit of a rude awakening because I was like, I couldn't stand another New York winter. I was like, I can't do that anymore. But we moved to San Francisco, and it was so cold. San Francisco is always kind of cold.
Yeah, I guess you don't expect that.
You don't expect that. So I was like, we're moving to sunny California.
Yeah,
it was not sunny California. Yeah. We also, like, such a weird random story, but like we had, when Cameron proposed to me, it was with a little tiny puppy, and it was like a
real puppy?
It was a little, that's also another funny story, but it was this little dog, Wilbur, and he was like a 5-pound Maltese, really small. And so we used to like put him in a bag and take him on planes or wherever we went when he was so small. But we moved to San Francisco. There had just been, it's so sad, but there had just been this like major dog mauling where these like pit bulls got out of an apartment building and like attacked this woman and killed her. It was like this crazy thing that had just happened in San Francisco. Jesus. Of course, like we had no idea. Yeah. We moved to San Francisco, and they're like, nobody would rent to us because we had a dog. And we're like, he couldn't hurt.
Like it's the size of a guinea pig?
Yeah, I'm like, this dog, can you show you the dog? Like, but there was like all these rules in place, and so we just could not find an apartment. Finally, we ended up in this like very, very small studio apartment that we kind of turned into one. It was such a bad experience. And I was like very lost in San Francisco because I was like, I just wanted to get pregnant. I was like, what am I going to do like for work? I started like a dog walking business when I lived in San Francisco. It was my brother actually was living in San Francisco at the time, and he had a really tiny dog that was like really small, but he lived like on the outskirts, and he had, his dog's name was Spike, and so I named it, and we loved Spike so much, and I called it Spike Dog Walking, and it was like this dog walking business, and I did that for a couple months, and I was like, I'm so bored, like I can't, this is not the thing. But it was funny because Cameron made me a cute little like business card, and I put it up all over town, and I got busy, you know. Yeah. But I was like calling him all day because I just didn't have anybody to talk to, and I wanted to have babies, so I did get pregnant in San Francisco, but because it was like kind of a tough year for us, we decided. Cameron didn't love his job, and so we ended up moving to LA, and I was pregnant at the time. We moved actually in with my brother because he'd now moved to LA too, and he was living right off Abbot Kinney in Venice Beach. So
that's so nice.
It was so great. He lived in this like cute little bungalow. We just like moved in with him because Cameron had to start this job.
Yeah.
I was super pregnant. We didn't know LA where we wanted to move, and Grant, my older son, who's now 13, was born in that house, and then we moved to an apartment in Santa Monica, and started our little life in LA.
Cool. So and then your husband was able to get a job doing the same thing.
So he
in
was
LA?
working. Yeah, he was working for an advertising agency called Secret Weapon. At the time, they were doing Jack in the Box and a couple other.
Great name.
Yeah.
Secret Weapon for like an ad agency.
And it was such a cool agency because you would walk in and there would be like there's like this like rocket and this like secret door, and it was all the guy who started it. This guy Dick Siddig. He was like the mastermind behind the Energizer Bunny. That was his idea.
Yeah.
He's a really smart guy, and so Cameron worked for him for a long time, for a while, and learned a lot from him. Was making great money. We had our second son. We had this like little apartment in Santa Monica. It was a 1-bedroom, and then we moved to a 2-bedroom in Santa Monica. And like I was like happy as could be. All I wanted for so long was to have babies, and I was living in LA like totally immersed in the mommy community, and like super happy.
Yeah, that's so cool. So how old are you at this point?
So Grant was 30 I was 30 when Grant was born, and I guess I was like 32 when Kit was born. So yeah, I think I was like we were 32, 33. And that's when I started after Kit was born, my second son, it got way harder. And I was like, well, one kid was really easy. I mean, I used to like have Grant like in a sling, and I would take him everywhere, and he was like my little baby accessory. It was so fun. And then when I had my second son, I was like, oh shit, like
there's two of them. It's
hard. And then they were like, one would go this way, one would go that way, and I was like, how do people do this? And I had at that point I had been like, at the point where I was like home for like about 5 years as a stay-at-home mom, which I felt so lucky that I was even able to do that, and that I had that life, and thought for so long, this is like the greatest thing ever. Like I'm so lucky that I have this life. But then after 5 years, I was like, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like I'm not like being like challenged mentally. And I just felt like I needed to do something for myself again. And that's when the idea for starting a mobile blow dry business. Because I was like, maybe, at that point, all my friends knew that I had spent years, even though I'd had other jobs, that I'd, basically been doing hair for like 20 years off and on.
Yeah. And why, how that concept? Yeah.
Well, because of my naturally curly hair, and my friends like knew that I could always like blow out their hair before we went out. And like my best friend had really curly hair, and I used to always blow out her hair. And
were you like the friend for that?
I was the friend.
Like, go to her, she'll
hook you up. Yeah. And that was me, and to all of my friends. And so I was literally, my best friend Paige and I were like sitting in my living room, our babies crawling around us, and I was like, maybe I should start a mobile blow dry business. I'm like, you always want me to blow dry your hair. I'm sure there's other women. There's nowhere to go. Yeah. So, we were like, she was like, that's a great idea. And Cam came home that night, and I told him, I was like, I think that maybe I should start a business so I can totally do it on my terms. So I could figure out like childcare for the kids for a couple hours, and I could just run around doing blowouts, which I always loved as like my favorite part of even when I was cutting hair, was like getting to the blowout, because that's when you saw the whole thing come to life and whatever. So I was like, Cam thought it was a great idea. I thought of the name Straight at Home, which I was very proud of. And Cameron made me this like 1-page website, and he was like, if we make you a really cute website, people will look at it and they'll call you because the website's cute, which is probably like my first marketing lesson, really. Yeah. And so that's what I did. And I posted it on some like mommy blog or whatever that I was on. And I was like, hey, I'm a longtime hairstylist. I'm thinking about starting a mobile business, charging $35 or $40. Anybody interested? And lo and behold, I got inundated with emails.
Right away.
When can you come?
Wow. Let me ask you this from a guy's perspective.
Yeah. Do you even know what a blowout is?
Not really. Like not fully. I have like a visual of like what's happening, and I know everyone's really happy afterwards. Yeah. But I don't,
that's what I mean? All you really need to know.
Yeah, that's all
Well, it's like when a girl goes and gets her hair cut or colored.
Yeah.
Because you probably know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know what guys know.
I'm not completely brain dead.
So when she's done, her hair looks like almost like red carpet ready. Like she has this like, like supermodel kind of hair.
Yeah.
What we did was basically say, okay, we're going to skip all the cut and color part of it, and you're just going to come in, we're going to wash your hair and just do the styling
so it's like a quick
part.
Refresh.
Yes.
Okay, and let me ask you this question. Why was there such a demand for it? Why didn't they just do this at salons?
very good question. So if you think back to like our grandmothers and grandmothers' generation, and there's references in it in movies and stuff where like women got their hair coiffed in like big beehives and all that stuff. They wouldn't touch it for like a week. If you ever like talk to your grandmother or whatever about this, she'll tell you this. So I also, back to growing up in South Florida, I went to beauty school in South Florida, and I used to work on all these little old ladies who had like 4 hairs but wanted tons of volume. And so they used to tell me stories like that. They used to get their hair done once a week at the beauty parlor, and then they wouldn't touch it, and then it was like their ritual, and they would go to the beauty parlor. So again, talking about things that I learned all that during all of my years that I didn't realize I learned, that was definitely one of the things. So I think what happened, I guess, somewhere along the line, that behavior that those women used to do, like, just went away. And so it became like, you could, salons, regular traditional salons offer blowouts, but they charge a lot for them. So they'll charge like 60, 70, 80, $100. Like if you go to Vegas and you go to a hair salon, like you're easily paying $150 for just a blowout. I honestly don't know, except my best guess is that, because especially in places like LA and New York, like, a hairstylist, a really good hairstylist can get like $300 or more for a haircut. Yeah. Same with highlights, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, I know hairstylists who charge $800 for a haircut, which is crazy. I know, it's insane. But anyway, so they don't
worth their time thing.
Right. So they don't want to spend an hour on a blowout that's going to cost them, even if it's $150. They're like, they want to be doing the cut and color, which I get and respect, especially as like a cutter. I would rather do a haircut too. It's more money. It's more like there, and you have that client, whatever. So I guess it just like kind of faded away because it wasn't something that was popular, because it wasn't something stylists wanted to do. Yeah. So that behavior just kind of somewhere along the line went away, which I think when I was operating my mobile business and I would ask my clients, like, if I can't come to your house to do your blowout, which I was only charging $40 to do, what do you do? And the answer was always, I either like begrudgingly go to my cut and color salon, which all the stuff I just mentioned, but also the fact that there's someone who's like, you really need a haircut, or like, you should change your color, like a little bit of pressure. Yeah. That's kind of annoying. And you're paying so much money. Or there's like the discount chains, like Fantastic Sam's and things like that, which those are great businesses, but like you're sitting next to a kid getting a haircut, like the experience isn't great. The lighting is bad. Like you're like, yeah. So even though that was cheaper, variable pricing, all of that. So there was just not a good option. And that's when I think that's when the idea started kind of percolating for me, and I was like, maybe we need to like turn my mobile business into a brick and mortar instead of me, because I got so busy, and I was like, do I bring on other stylists and do this mobily, or do I open an actual location? And that's when I went to my brother and my husband, and I was like, guys, like, I think I should turn Straight at Home into what we originally, and still own the URL for Straight Bar. Thank God we didn't call it that.
That would not, especially in 2018, they would not have done.
But I mean, and at that time, which I'm sure you have no idea about this, but at that time, the Brazilian blowout, which is like a method of straightening hair chemically, was very popular. Do you remember that?
So that's completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, the Brazilian
I'm such a dude. Because I know I've heard Brazilian blowout a million times, and then I just kind of thought blowout is probably just the American version.
Yeah, no. No. So you would not be the first person to question that. But a Brazilian blowout is like a technique of, really what they do is they put this like solution in their hair, you blow dry the hair, then you flat iron. It's this whole like process. Got it. And that's very different than what we do. So we were like, well, Straight Bar is going to be really confusing. Not to mention my gay friends were like, what the fuck? Yeah, not approved. So no, not approved. But we still own it if you'd like it. If you ever need it.
That could be valuable for something. I'm not sure
someday.
What. Yeah.
So anyways, we rightfully so came up with the name Drybar. But the reason that I went to my brother and my husband was because it was like I didn't really have any experience in like starting a business, and back to my Alex P. Keaton brother, who was smart and like started putting spreadsheets and shit together and like figuring out if we could actually make money from this business. He was helping me with that, and he basically taught me the concept of sweat equity, and he was putting up all the money, and I was getting sweat equity, and my husband, the creative genius that he is, started working on the website, and I was figuring out like how the shop was going to run and what like kind of licensing we needed from the state for the cosmetology board. And
can I ask you this? Was it hard because those guys were both doing really well, and I'm guessing really busy. Yeah. Was it hard to like were you like being like, hey, can you just come over like at 9 after work and
Yeah.
like just help me with this thing? Like, what was that process?
Well,
like?
it was hard, and my brother had also worked for Yahoo in like Yahoo's heyday, so that was just how he had money to put into this business. And so he at the time was he'd had a lot of like great jobs, but he had started a real estate marketing company with his best friend, this guy Elliot. And they were busy and they were like doing well, and it was good. But Cameron had, side note is that Cameron didn't even leave his advertising agency job until about 2 years after we started Drybar, because we couldn't afford him and we needed to like stay in our house and pay, feed our children.
Yeah.
So, because I really wasn't making any money when we first started Drybar, but that's exactly what we were doing. It was like, I'd get the kids down, Cameron would get home from work, Michael would get home from work, and the three of us would be like on our laptops in bed, Michael at his house, me and Kim in our bed.
Yeah.
And we would be on our laptops, like figuring, doing it all like from 9 o'clock until the wee hours of the night, like, going back and forth on everything, concepting everything, and the weekends, like we just we were moonlighting to get this open. I started like interviewing stylists, because that was the other big question mark for me. Like, will there be enough stylists out there that will want to just blow dry hair? Because I liked that part of it, but I didn't know if stylists would be willing to do that, which it turns out we actually like bridged a gap, I think, from stylists who are coming out of beauty school and haven't quite got their footing in the industry yet. Drybar is a great place for them to work. So,
do you think it makes it easier to find employees?
What?
Meaning, like, and I don't mean this in any sort of like negative way towards them, but meaning that they can be just starting out and still do a pretty good job at this one thing. Is that true or no?
It is. It's somewhat true. And I always say that like we can't take everybody out of beauty school, because you're right. There's some people that and I've seen it. There's some stylists who come out of beauty school and they're just like, they've been doing hair their whole life anyway. They just had to go to get the license kind of thing. Yeah. And they're so good.
Just like a prodigy.
They're just good. And then there's some people who come out of school where you're like, you need a couple years, like you got to go figure this out a little bit on your own, then come back to us. Because I've always said we can take a good stylist and make them great. I can't take a stylist that has like barely any like experience or skills and make them good. We don't have that kind of training program.
It just seems cool. What I'm once again, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like from my perspective, like you created this massive business out of this, like out of everyone in the middle, meaning the really bad people you can't do anything with. And the prodigies are going to want to go be celebrity hairstylists. But like you can work with all these people, and that just seems so cool.
And it is, and it's great. And we have 3,000 stylists that work for us across the country, which is a ton. And and half of those stylists do work in a full service cut and color salon too. So they will work for us part-time and them part-time. And what's great about that is like it's it's a lead generator for them, which we're totally fine with. Like if you're sitting in a stylist chair and you end up going back to that stylist over and over again because you just like the way they blow out your hair, like you might be inclined to let them cut your hair at your salon down the street.
And you don't care about that.
I don't care about that. What I care about is if they're like aggressively like, what we teach our stylists is like, don't ever tell a woman she needs a haircut, even if she does, because it's like Drybar is a happy place. We make women feel good here. We don't tell them they need haircuts or color. I mean, we can be honest, and of course, if somebody asks like, "Hey, what do you think?" Totally, of course, be honest. But the idea and the philosophy of Drybar has always been this: like, we're gonna make you feel like the best version of yourself. So we're not gonna give you like shit about your color and anything else. But if the relationship grows and they want, then by all means, And then we've had stylists who have worked in their full service salon and they're like slow, so then they'll come back and pick up shifts at Drybar, and we're pretty flexible with how many hours they can work and all of that. So I wish a place like Drybar existed when I had come out of beauty school, because I, like most stylists, worked as someone's assistant for years before they start to feed you clients, and you slowly but surely work up your own book. It takes a long time, and you don't make any money. I mean, you can make like decent money, working at Drybar. Tips are good, and they make commission off our products and all that. So,
and it seems like you created, like how you just said, like you had to figure out at some point that this is what you were okay with. This is what Drybar stood for. We don't talk to you about your hair looking shitty. Do you learn that just from things coming up, or like was that part of the bed in the laptop phase, or like it just seems like a really strong brand? There was certainly a lot that we figured out beforehand, and then there was a lot that we figured out as we went. It's like I started in the beginning, I didn't really do any training of our stylists, and I realized that like there was this period where like when we opened a new shop,
it was like, we were like, yeah, with the blowouts, some were good, some weren't. It was a bit of a crapshoot. And I was like, it wasn't until we were opening our first store in New York City and we had this like event where the beauty editors were coming to preview Drybar before we actually opened. And then I was like, oh shit, I got to make sure these stylists, whoever we put on the floor, are ready. And so I took some of my best stylists from LA. We all flew to New York and we set up like in a hotel room and I trained stylists and like what to do and what not to do so that they were ready for this moment that we were getting ready for. So there was a lot of learnings along the way. And I think, I think we kind of, we bootstrapped it in so many ways in those early days and figured out the things that worked and didn't work. And, the brand grew as a result.
Yeah, it's cool. It's just really cool. And any of my girlfriends that I know that I even told about doing this interview, they're like, oh, Drybar's so cool.
Oh,
like, we just love it. It's just
good.
so cool. You know what I mean? So to create something that can grow to that level and resonate with people in that way is really tough.
It's neat. And I think that I say it all the time. It's like it never would be what it is without so many different things. It's like, why I think girls say that. It's like, it's the branding. I've always felt like the branding gets them in the door. And that's like, my husband is such a genius when it comes to that. It's the customer experience in the shop. It's like, it looks and feels really high end, but it has a mom and pop feel. Like we're really nice. If we're doing our job, we're really nice to people. Like you feel really welcome. You don't feel like the elitistness that LA can sometimes kind of have. And, and it's like little things like having iPhone chargers at all the stations and like the chick flicks and the fact that my brother brought in this like world-renowned architect that we couldn't afford, and we ended up having to give equity because we couldn't afford him. But we got this. His name is Josh Heitler, and he's amazing. And we got him to like design the space, and it's designed in a way that acoustically it works. There's so many thousands of little touch points that make, and then like the emails and the way that we try to think about everything, which I think is a good lesson, and it's something that I think a lot of businesses miss is like those touch points and how they're all so important. Like we make the bathrooms cute because we want people to like have that like surprise and delight when you walk in the bathroom and you're like, oh, it's so cute in here. It's like doesn't really matter, but at the end of the day, it's like another touch point that makes them love your brand. Yeah,
it's funny too how much people do care. Like I think when you're running a brand like that, like sometimes you just kind of think, who really cares? Or this is cheaper. Or this is like, you know what I mean?
Easier, yeah.
But it just shows that your business is one that shows that when you stack them, you have created something that is uniquely yours.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think it feels like, it sounds to me, from as much as I can gather from my dude perspective, it sounds to me like all of the things that all the problems you solved with the blowouts and all that stuff are sort of like embodied in this location.
100%.
Right?
I think that like, the fact that I was like, I don't know if you've ever actually been inside of a Drybar, but the fact that I was, in my mobile business, I was doing clients' hair like in their living room or their kitchen, like never in their bathroom, rarely in their bathroom. So they were never sitting in front of a mirror. And so that was another thing. I was like, when they were done, or when I was done with their blowout, they would go find a mirror somewhere in their house, and then inevitably I always hear this big like, oh my God, like this squeal of delight because they'd only seen their hair wet when they came out of the shower, and then they would see their hair completely done when I was ready for them to see it. And I was telling Josh, our architect, that story, and I was like, so how do we create that in Drybar? Like, I don't want it to be like a client is sitting in front of a mirror staring at herself with wet hair. As women, like we end up like picking ourselves apart. We're like, I look tired and blah, blah, blah. And so that was like one of Josh's big tasks from us was like, how do we create this moment of like this big reveal, which so, and if you ask any of your girlfriends, they probably are aware of this. Like when you're done at Drybar, they spin you around because the mirror is actually behind you. And that's like the big reveal. And that's when they're like, oh my God, I love it. And they get so excited, And it's this really special moment that a lot of people have copied from us, but not quite right. But that was all, that my mobile business informed that and so many of the other things that I did, and having worked in other professional hair salons and the cutthroatness of it and the things that I felt like I didn't like out of those salons or things that I was like, fuck it, I'm going to make this how I want it and hope for the best.
It's so good. Because you know what I think happens? I think almost when not everyone, when a lot of people start a business, they kind of have that mentality, like, I'm going to fix all the things that were wrong. And then because of budgets and all that stuff, you just become another one, right? You just become another salon, another whatever. But I just, man, you're a real testament to like sticking to those things creates
Yeah.
a unique.
And I think it's like partially like just being kind of blissfully unaware of things like budgets. And I was,
Yeah.
you know, and I was like, I remember our parents, Michael and I's parents, being like, you're spending how much on this store? And that was like, again, I was like, numbers were like lost on me, but we spent a lot of money opening these stores. And my parents were like, how are you spending this much money on this store when you're only charging $35 for a blowout, which now it's $45. But, you know, and it was like, that was really my brother's insight. Like, we can't go cheap. Like, we have to really make this, you know, great and stand out and not like anything else. And so, you know, that's where, you know, that's where it's like such a beautiful thing to have partners with you who can like fill in the blanks on things you don't know.
Yeah, it worked. It worked. What so when the first store opened, was it like immediate?
It was pretty
Was it
immediate.
a blowout?
It was a major blowout. It was pretty crazy.
Sorry, we should maybe cut that
But
out.
I'm done. Yeah, it was bananas. I mean, it was. So we had. Do you remember Daily Candy?
No.
So you're not a girl, so you probably don't. But Daily Candy was like it was before. Well, how many years ago was Daily Candy? Like 10 years ago? It was like the thing. You would get this like email from Daily Candy maybe once a week, and it would tell you what the new cool like restaurant or store or whatever was.
Was it an LA thing?
No, it was. I think the woman who had started it was in New York, and so you basically signed up to be on this newsletter. But it was truly like they were discovering shit that nobody knew about, and it was always cool. And so you were like, Daily Candy was like it. Like they delivered, and it was just like it was really cool. And if you ask any of your girlfriends, they're like, "Oh my god, I used to love Daily Candy."
Yeah.
Every girl says that. Anyways, Daily Candy, and this was like before, like again, 10 years ago. Like things weren't. Not everybody had smartphones yet. People had Blackberries, but you know, it was a different time. And so Daily Candy we knew enough from both of my brother and I had worked in PR, and we knew enough that we needed to like get the word out about what Drybar was. It was also in the middle of a recession. So it was 2010. Anyways, we had hired PR, and we got Daily Candy to write a thing about us. And I would say about a week or so before we opened the doors, Daily Candy wrote us like a little editorial piece and said like, you know, like something new is blowing into town, very punny. And and at that point, Michael and I used to get like all the new appointment notifications on our Blackberries whenever anybody would book an appointment, which were like trickling in like here and there. But this day, the Daily Candy piece ran, and all of a sudden, which we didn't actually know at that time, but all of a sudden both of our phones started blowing up with appointment notifications. And we were like, we thought it was a glitch in the system. We're like, what's happening? And then someone sent us the Daily Candy article, and we were like, oh, like Daily Candy had just put it out there that this new concept of just blowouts is coming to LA. So that was like the big thing for us. And I probably talk about it in every interview I've ever done because it was like the thing. Yeah. And again, 10 years ago, Daily Candy was it. So we used to have like on our windows, it used to say pop-ins welcome, like walk-ins welcome, because we didn't know if the business was going to be like, you know, you're booking an appointment online or whatever. So we just thought people would walk in, but it turned out people were always booking online. We had to take all that off and like get new collateral, because the first day it was like booked solid. Like we did not have enough stylists on. We couldn't even answer the phones. Like we had a phone at the front desk, but there was a girl at the front desk, and I didn't want the girl at the front desk or me and being on the phone when you walked in and I'm looking at your face. Like I don't want to be on the phone. Like, you know, that would be a terrible experience for both people. So I was like, just don't answer the phone. Let it go to voicemail. We'll call everybody back, which by the way, you know, side note, we ended up having to start like a call center because we couldn't answer the phones in the shops because it was loud, and the blow dryers and the whole thing. Because blow dryers were going all day long. The music was really loud. It was this environment that we created. And it was like, I mean, women were coming in, and because we had like walk-ins welcome, they were coming in and they were like, it says right here, like walk-ins welcome. And we're like, I'm like, I don't have enough people. I don't have enough room. I'm like, I want to take your money. Like, I want you to get a blow up, but like, I don't have anywhere to put you. I mean, we used to put people like in like a little bit of like, which was terrible branding. We used to like bring out a stool and like figure out how to like do, I mean, because it was so crazy. And that's when my brother was still operating his business at that time. In the very, very early days. And I remember like within like the first week, I was like, Mike, you have to quit your job and you have to find us more locations. Like I need help, and I needed help like managing like the back end of the business. And so he did. And he did
that pretty quick.
He did it pretty quick because the writing was on the wall, and we were like, we have captured lightning in a bottle here. Like we've got to keep going.
Good. Can I ask you a couple like, do you think, just to understand the dynamic, like, do you think in the beginning that your husband and brother were helping because they loved you and you were their wife and sister, or because they were like, whoa, this is something, like, did they know what was coming? Did they know that maybe they could quit their jobs on this?
Yes and no. I think that none of us could have ever imagined what the success and how huge this business would become. 100%.
It just has to be so cool.
I mean, I remember the first day, and I think my husband has a picture of it. I remember the first day because Michael and Cameron weren't actually in the shop on that first day.
Yeah.
Michael's wife Sarah was, and she's always been she's the spirit director, we call her. She's awesome, and she was there with me and like in the store, but Michael and Cameron weren't. And I remember like us all on the phone like crying, and when the store was open, because we were like, oh my god, like we fucking like hit the jackpot here. Like, oh my God, like we couldn't believe, the success of it. And I think that there was like, if you were talking to my brother, he would probably tell you like that $250,000 he put into the business. Like he was like, maybe I'll see that money again. Maybe I won't. But I love my sister and we were always so close. And he thought eventually that money would get recouped, and but it was like a nice thing to do for me. It would be a way for me to have like a nice little livelihood.
Got it.
And I think in the back of his mind, he was like, maybe there's like potential for this to be a little bit bigger. And I think that's kind of what Cameron thought too. I mean, Cameron always felt like my husband, that he was like, you get your nails done once a week, but I rarely notice. And he's like, but when you get a blowout, it's like the first thing I notice. Yeah. And he's like, I would imagine that it'll become like the new nail salon where women will just want blowouts all the time. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, maybe, and then I very quickly realized, we all quickly realized we had changed behavior, and it's like we made it like an affordable luxury for women everywhere to get a $35 blowout, when they thought it was only reserved for like celebrities and like really, really wealthy women. It was like, this affordable thing that they could take part in too. And so they were all over it.
I just love the idea of you. I always loved the like bed late at night with the laptops building a new business visual, right? Love that.
So I remember it like it was yesterday.
And also the fact that you were able to have your husband and brother quit their jobs to come work for like your little vision.
It's such like the American dream,
cool.
right?
Yeah.
And it's, what else is so cool about it? And we talk about this all the time. It's like, obviously I'm very close to my husband, and my brother's like my best friend. So like and they get along really well, and me and, we all get along so well. So it's like so cool, because there was definitely a time, like when I was having babies and my brother wasn't even married yet, that we were like just worlds apart, and we weren't and we had always been close growing up. So to be able to come back together and work together and have that like us all be like just close again, it's so cool. And they're my best friends, and I not only enjoy working with them, like I just enjoy being with them all the time anyway. So it's such a cool
thing you created. Yeah. And then my other question was, have you always been good at like dealing with stress? And I don't know whether you translate it as extremely stressful or not, but when you were just telling the story of like, everyone hears the like success of the store blowing up quick and blah, blah, blah. But like, that sounds also insanely stressful. Don't answer the phones and greet people when they see you and blah, blah, blah. No mirrors and this and that. So
stressful.
Have you just been good at dealing with that, or did you have to like learn ways to deal with it?
I had to learn. I was definitely like a total stress case. I worked 7 days a week for 6 months. Wouldn't leave the store. I never left the store. I would start to leave earlier, and then we had like cameras in the store, so I could see from my phone when I wasn't I was a psychopath.
Yeah.
So no, I was definitely stressed for years. And as we started to expand the company, we opened our second store, and then our third store and fourth store. And like in those days, it was like we were like in Studio City, West Hollywood, and Palisades. So I could pretty easily like hit all the stores in one day, which I used to do. So I could make sure, the bartenders were greeting people right. I could make sure the stylists were doing like the blowouts right, because all that stuff, the shop was clean. Like I was able to manage that at that point. And then as we started to grow, I was like not able to manage that. And then we started to bring in more people. And that was something that my brother was really adamant about. He was like, I think we need to bring in people who had experience scaling and growing a business, because we didn't. We were entrepreneurs with a good idea and a vision and whatever. Yeah. And so that was really stressful, trusting other people and getting comfortable trusting other people. And for years, I mean, I used to go in the shops and I would just be mad. I'm talking about poking the bear. I'd be so mad because I wanted it to be perfect and I wanted the shops to be so clean and I wanted the blowouts to be perfect and I wanted people greeted a certain way and there are all these things that I still want. And, you know, I think 90% of the time we get that stuff right, but we don't always. And we're also really big on like, and a lot of this stuff comes to me directly, which I'm fine with, is, you know, even though so much of it is filtered because we do like 1.2 million blowouts a year. But I get emails from clients who are like, you know, I was in and, you know, even though the vast majority of people love their hair and love the experience, I do get emails from time to time who are like, you know, I was in and the girl at the front wasn't nice or I didn't love my hair or whatever, which is like, it's like stabbing me in the chest. And I get so angry and I get so frustrated and I'm such a like, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if this one woman is saying it, it probably means like there's like 100 other women who felt this way. And then I spiral out of control and all. So yes, there's a lot of stress, but it's come with a lot over the years. I've learned how to manage it and how to also like, not like make everybody crazy about it. And, you know, we brought in a professional CEO about 4 years into the business and it was really like one of the best things we ever did. And he's like such a like mild manner, like we call him the adult in the room. His name is John Hefner. And he's like, he'd worked with founders before, always had worked with founders, come from the beauty industry. And he just was like, we had a lot of like therapy sessions in his office with him being like, you know, teaching me kind of ways to like deal with situations better and how, you know, and I finally got to the point where if I would walk in a store, I would kind of, it was important that I had a happy demeanor and I would like talk to customers and the employees and whatever without being like a raging bitch. And then after I left, I'd make a list and I'd send like an email, which I started doing that at some point, but the emails were a little feisty. And then I started getting a little better with my tone. And then sometimes I would just call so I could get it right off my chest because we have people in place that can deal with these things. And if something is not working and we have a system that's not working, we need to figure it out and fix it. And that's what we ultimately do now. It just took a long time to get to all that. You know, when you've never had run a business at that level, at that scale, with that many people, it's like, it's a hard adjustment. And to not make every single decision yourself is, it's hard.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Because even here, like I have a total of about 40 employees. And one of the big things that gets me is there's always like things that go on that I don't know because of the way people present things to you, right? And
that drives me crazy.
It drives me crazy. And also, I'm talking about
it's
40
like they shield
people.
you or something a little too.
Yeah, and there's like little beefs going on, like 10 feet from me that I don't even know happened. You know what I mean? And there's little like some people hate each other.
I always want to know all that stuff.
I want to know it all. And so my point is, I'm talking about 40 people. I'm also talking about nobody that deals with like customers directly, right?
Yeah.
Like, I guess my question is, how do you try to get the realest information possible of how people are dealing with customers and how, I mean, do you just...
Well, I think it's a lot of different ways. I mean, I don't ever tell people I'm coming into a store. I just pop in. So you get like I can get a really quick snapshot. I ask my friends to go in and tell me what they see.
I wonder if you had like an undercover boss situation.
And we do have some secret shoppers, and we've instituted some things like that. So there's a lot of ways. I honestly like I really get like I have a lot of really good friends who will tell me I was in Drybar and blah 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 happened, you know. And then I have friends who won't totally tell me the whole truth. But and then I think that there's like, you know, there's a lot of employees that have worked for us for a very long time, and some of them are like a little more straight with me on stuff than others. And to your point, there's nothing that drives me more crazy of someone trying to like sugarcoat something for me or not want me to know about a situation. And sometimes like I'll overhear something and I'll be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, no, it's fine. I'm like, tell me what the fuck is going on, you know? And so, you know, and listen, I mean, sometimes I have learned though, it's like sometimes, okay, I don't want to know. Okay, you guys deal with that. But it's also just an adjustment, you know, it's like, it's your baby and you want to make sure everything is going the way it needs to. It's hard. I mean, for me, there's a lot of ups and downs and I'm not as nearly as in the weeds as I used to be with the day-to-day operations. So there's a lot of things that happen and decisions that I may not have made, but somebody else, but we've put in, like, we have a huge executive team. They're making decisions now. And they, you know, we've gotten to the point where like, they know the things that are like important to me or the things that are important to them that I am aware of. And it's like, but still sometimes wires get crossed and things happen. And I'm like, how could you guys do this? You know? And, you know, I think that nobody wants me to be unhappy. Nobody wants me to be upset because I am like a bit of a stink maker. If like something, if there's something that's like crazy, I'm gonna like make a big stink about it. You know, I feel like I found that voice. But for the most part, I think I've chilled out. Yeah, also
that's so good. How fast you guys grew really fast, right?
Yeah.
So take me just through a quick timeline of like the first store opens, huge success. You realize you need to open another one pretty quickly. How many do you have now?
So we have 105.
Jesus Christ. In how many states?
Oh my God, I don't know. I should know that. We're everywhere. We're across the U.S. I mean, we're everywhere from like, California, Arizona, like Atlanta, Dallas. I mean, all over Texas. We're in Chicago, New York, Boston.
Jesus.
We're in like Louisville, Kentucky. We're in North Carolina.
Louisville,
we're in
Kentucky?
Florida.
You're literally everywhere. I was gonna say everywhere, but like the Louisville, Kentuckys of the world. But you're even there.
We just opened a shop like in Michigan. I mean, that's the thing is there are definitely like pockets of like the country that like places like, not that I know much about like Montana, where it's like most of it is like just land and people don't actually live there. But then there's like a pocket that is like a really like affluent community where there's tons of women, and like that's where we go. That's where we would go. So we're definitely testing the market to smaller areas, like not such metropolitan cities. To see if and so far so good, because we always joke around that like our demo is women with hair. And there's women with hair everywhere.
That is very true.
So really,
it's interesting. Like I wonder where, like, is there a bar, not a Drybar type bar, but like a bar set where people no longer care about that level of beauty?
I think that there is. I mean, and what, it's interesting is when we first opened in San Francisco, not San Francisco proper, but like the outskirts, Silicon Valley-ish. It was a slower ramp. All of our stores have kind of what's called a ramp period where they either take off, like the ramp is different everywhere. In San Francisco or outside San Francisco, it was like a little longer, and we were like kind of puzzled by it, like why? And it was definitely like, Priuses versus Range Rovers, kind of, donating all your money to charity, not the big house and the car and the beauty treatments, I guess. But regardless of that, what we got women to come around to is like, listen, just come in, like just let us treat you on the first one. And we did all sorts of marketing. If you come in just once and you see like how much it changes like your mood and your day and how you just feel like all of a sudden so much more confident about yourself, I think you'll start coming in. And that's always been, that's always been kind of our overarching marketing strategy. And when we were first opening our first store in Brentwood, my brother wanted to put on the window graphics, the first 250 people who sign up to our website get a free blowout. And I was like, are you out of your fucking mind? In my mind, we were only going to do like 30 blowouts a day. So if we were going to give the first 250 away, we were never going to make any money. I'm like, you are crazy. And he's like, Alli, they're not going to all come in on the same day. And he's like, we just got it. He was like, he really believed in that like trial, like if they can, and that was before we even knew like, the opportunity that was in front of us and how the women were going to react to this. But he's like, and that's always been like, I always have blowouts with me. And if I ever like meet a woman and she's not been to Drybar, or she's been dying to go to Drybar, she can't afford it, whatever, I give out blowouts like lollipops, and I always have them with me. And my kids have seen me do that. Like I've been in a store and a girl like the checkout like will be like, oh, you're Alli Webb, you started Drybar, and she's like, oh, I love Drybar, and I was like, oh, have you been? And she'll be like, well, I haven't been yet because well, whatever she tells me. And so I would just hand her one. But my younger son, especially Kit, loves this, and he's seen me do that, and he sees how like excited girls. Of course, if someone hands you a free blowout, you're pretty stoked. So he now, when he's like with me and like that moment happens, he'll be like, can I give it to her, mommy? So now I'll give him the blowout, and he'll like run up and give it to her and like hug her. It's like so cute. But it was such a great little lesson because, I mean, for me, it's certainly like two-sided. Like I want her to I want her to experience Drybar. I just want to get her in the door so she'll love it and she'll become a customer. And that's good for business. But on the other hand, it's like she will always love us because I did that for her.
For sure.
She will tell 10 of her friends. Yeah. She'll be like, I met the founder of Drybar. She was so nice. She gave me a free blowout. And like, even if and then inevitably at some point fuck up with her, sometimes she'll still always like have this like thing with
you got like 3
customer
fuck-ups.
for life.
Yeah,
exactly.
You got like 3 fuck-ups for like, all right, Alli.
It's good for, and I think it's so good for my kids to like realize like how good it feels to give to somebody versus like they always want shit, you know, and they see how good it feels inside to give somebody that. So,
and I think what's so cool is like, not to get too sensitive here on this, but like is showing your kids that sort of letting them live by their own rules a little bit, showing them that hard work pays off, and that if you do work hard, you have things to give away for free. Right. I think is really nice. You know what I mean?
No, it's such a good point, and that's how I feel too. I mean, I do that a lot, and I feel like I want my kids to grow up with that like giving mentality. Yeah, it's important.
It's really cool. So, what was the date or the year that the first store opened? What was that?
2010.
So from 2010 to now, you've went from 0 to 105 stores.
Yeah. And there's been years that like we opened a lot of stores quickly those first like 2 or 3 years. And then like the 4th year when John came in, we kind of put on the brakes and we were like, we need to slow down and we need to get systems in place. And we were like running chickens running out of their heads cut off. Like that was how it was. And it was like all hands on deck. And like every single person at our company was at like every single opening. And we were just like, blah, you know, and that's where it was important to have someone like John come in and like maintain some order. And that I think it was 2014, I guess, that we pulled back and opened less stores, and then we ramped back up to open more stores. And like this year in 2018, right? That's where we are.
That's where we're at.
I think we'll open like 25 stores.
Is that the most in 1 year?
Yeah. Maybe even 30.
So you're not stopping anytime soon.
We're not stopping.
What do you think, like, how many stores could you open in the U.S.? 5,000?
Oh my God, no. I would say like maybe like 300. But then we also launched product around year 4.5.
Can I go back one thing?
Yeah.
Was it a hard decision, and sort of how did you find the right way to go on this when it came time to raise money? I know that's a big decision as a founder.
Totally. Well, that kind of came before John, so I skipped over kind of a part there. So we had raised most of our money through angel investors and friends and family. So we had people coming out of the woodwork when we first opened that first store, who like wanted in and wanted to invest. Right?
Yeah, I wish I knew you then.
Yeah. So that was like how we raised the first like couple of million. And and that, you know, my brother handled all of that. Like I was so busy running the stores, and then you know, my brother started talking to like this woman who was I guess investment banker, and she was like saying how, you know, you kind of need to do a formal process and go meet with like private equity groups, because if you really want to grow this thing quickly, which also we had a lot of people like on our coattails and a lot of people trying to copy us, and we felt like we needed like first mover advantage, and we had to go
for sure.
And we all kind of like locked arms and we're like, we're going to do this. And so we started meeting with a lot of different private equity groups, which is also kind of like a weird experience, like basically asking people to give you money, and especially like men.
And it gets real intrusive, and it just feels like a weird doctor's appointment.
It is.
Like where your soul is sort of getting.
Yeah, totally. And I was like very fish out of water in those meetings, and I was like very not poised for meetings like that, and also it was like all these very, very conservative like men in suits with like they had all the money, and I was like, oh Jesus, like no one's ever gonna give us money. Yeah, it was like it felt dirty.
Look at how cool we are.
You know,
give me money?
Yeah. And at that point, Drybar, we only had like maybe 11 or 12 locations, so we'd certainly made a name for ourselves, but we were still very small. And so in those meetings, there was always like a guy who's like girlfriend or wife or sister, somebody who knew about Drybar, but the idea of it becoming this like big brand. Everybody's a little sketchy about it. And I didn't think it was going to be that way. I remember we went into these meetings, and like the fact that people like weren't dying to give us their money, I was like, oh, really? Like, they don't think it's a good idea? And it wasn't until we met with Castanea, who was our first like big private equity investor. And they had at the time owned Urban Decay Cosmetics, and Janet Gerwich, who was the founder of Laura Mercier Cosmetics, which is another big cosmetic line. She was with them too, and so they just got us. They didn't want to change anything. they understood our vision. They liked us. We liked them. They were much more like chill and casual. And that's who we ended up ultimately, going into business with. And then that was like the first like big tranche of money we raised, which was around, 16, 20, something like that million. And that money was always like earmarked to open more stores and then to start the product line, which, by the way, nobody really believed in at that moment.
Really?
And I felt very strongly that I wanted a product line that was very like, at the time we were using products from different lines and it was just kind of messy and they didn't all work together and it was just like not the right assortment. So I really wanted to start a product line that was like exactly what we needed just for blowouts, like to make your blowout look better and to make it last longer. So I slowly but surely started working with Janet, who had such a successful makeup line, and she introduced me to all the best labs. And so like I was on my way, and then we started with the product line, which has now become, that was about 4 years ago. So that we launched in Sephora, exclusively in Sephora, and the product took off right away. And I think it's because we had the credibility of the shops and we had become this like blowout leader. And all of our products have always been very focused on just a blowout. We're not trying to do anything else, just a blowout.
Yeah, that's a big lesson.
Yeah. And so.
Is it Drybar branded product?
Yeah.
Right.
So my husband does all the branding. Like I'm in charge of what's inside. He's in charge of the outside, which now is like a huge team. There's a huge product team. There's a huge creative team, all that stuff. But, I mean, we're in Sephora, we're in Ulta, we're in Nordstrom, we're in Bloomingdale's. We have like about 3,000 points of distribution of just our product, which has become this whole other business within the Drybar business.
Was that hard to add that whole other business? Obviously you needed a new sales team, you needed all these people.
Yeah, it was. It was hard, and it's still hard. It is another business within the business. Yeah. So, but it's also like a part of the business that I truly love. And as a hairstylist, like, I'm always like dreaming up new products, and I talk to my stylists and ask them like what they like and that's how the whole product line started. I would ask stylists like, what products do you love, but you wish they did this? Or is there a product that doesn't exist that you wish it did? And so, I've always had this like great pool of stylists to bounce ideas and thoughts of, which is a great like lab, to develop a product line. So, my brother like always like would joke around like I didn't think my little sister could develop a product line, and I didn't think I could either. I mean, that to me was like, okay, like don't push your luck here. And we started the product line, and it has gone over so well, and people love it, and that's like a whole other like.
That's so cool.
Who knew?
Do you think the product line could be bigger in revenue than the actual?
I think maybe.
You think it could?
I do.
It just seems like something that could be just huge.
It's about 30-something% of the overall business now. So I think it has.
After how long though? How long has it been up?
About 4 years, and Drybar's 8 years.
Yeah.
So maybe.
So it's gaining ground.
Because the thing is like, I would love to open 5,000 stores, but I don't think that's realistic. But, we just launched international with our product. We don't have stores internationally yet, which I think we will. But there's a lot more places to go with product than you can go with a physical location.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my money's ultimately on product too. But the product would never have worked, never would work without the credibility of the stores.
Agreed. It's so cool. It's really cool what you've built.
Thanks.
How do you, because you've mentioned a couple of times, and I could see this, how it would be insanely difficult in this type of business, people trying to knock you off. How do you deal with it? How do you, first of all, I really want to know this for myself, how do you deal with it on a personal level, not lose your mind and like punch holes in the wall? And then how do you make sure that you stay, I mean, it's so hard to innovate and come up with a new idea to start a business, and then to have to repeatedly do it. Yeah, I feel like sometimes seems really unfair. Yeah, you just want to be like, this isn't fair. This was mine. This is my toy. Yeah. How do you keep doing that?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, when we first started this, it was such a new concept. Nobody was doing it, which is why we were getting like so much press and so much excitement and whatever. And then people started copying us, but they weren't doing it well. And that was kind of what we found, is that like they looked at this as like a very opportunistic thing. Like I can hire some stylists, paint some walls, and have a blow dry bar. Yeah. And so that was what we realized, what most people were doing. So we were very scared. And I would like always, anybody who comes in our shop, I always like, I'm a pretty open book. Like I would tell them anything about our business, because I never felt like anything was like super secret. But there was certainly cases of like people like took that information I gave them and went and opened their own places. And some people did it in like their own way, where they had their own voice and their own colors and their own like shtick, you know. But then there are definitely a lot of places that have called themselves Drybar, like Sally's Drybar, and they've taken like verbiage off our website. I even once found a website that had a picture of me on their website, and I was like, "You got
Alli Webb loves."
Yeah, I know,
Sally's
like
Drybar.
as if like it was just a picture of me like doing a blowout, and I was like, you can't have my picture on your website.
Yeah.
So there's, and not to mention like all the like, I don't know if you deal with this too, but not to mention all like the legal fees that you then incur because you have to send cease and desist letters to all these people. Like you can't, more than like the personal assault and how that feels. It's like, it's the confusion in the marketplace that's annoying because if you walk as one of my clients, if you walk into a place that looks and feels like Drybar, and you pretty much like, and you don't know Drybar that well, and you think it's Drybar, but then you have a shitty experience there, then you start to hate our brand. Because you're not getting the right experience. And so that's like, and so we've been able to prove that in certain cases that like you are creating legitimate confusion in the marketplace and that's not okay. And I think that like personally I have those moments too where I'm like just so annoyed and mad. And then I also have those moments of like zen where I'm like, no, it's good. It's like the more like blow dry bars that are out there, the more like awareness there is to the category. Like on my good days, that's kind of how I feel about it. And then on some days, I'm just so annoyed and pissed off that like, but at this point, and I also think it keeps you on your toes. I think it does keep you like feeling like, okay, we can't get complacent. Like we have to we have to constantly be at the top of our game because we've got, I mean, for obvious reasons, but also just because like we can't like slide here, And we have so many more stores and so much more like manpower now. But I mean, when the first competitor that opened up down the street from our Brentwood location, I used to like drive by it every day, like with like my head really low,
with a beanie on,
just trying to like see what was going on in there. And it ended up it's closed now. It didn't do well. So, yeah, I mean,
I said it. That was me.
Yeah, the thing about it is, I think that there is a secret sauce that we have, and I think there's something that we do that's not easily duplicatable, and I think that's what a lot of people have found out. And then like some businesses are probably doing fine, and then some end up becoming full service salons where they're doing cuts and color and all other stuff too. And that's usually when we know they're not like obviously cutting it with just blowouts. But
stop copying, guys.
Yeah,
because you're gonna lose.
Do what you're doing your own way.
And the lesson of the podcast is don't poke the bear. That goes for you, copycats. Okay, this is another one that I was wondering is social media affecting your business in any way, or
in a good way? I mean, when we first started Drybar, I think actually Instagram was just starting, but I didn't even know about Instagram, and Twitter was kind of the thing. And when I remember women used to like, I was really active on Twitter, which I'm not really anymore, but women would, tweet about their experience, like how much they loved it. And then they would sometimes put like a picture of themselves in it but it was like pictures in Twitter weren't that great, but women still did it. But it was when Instagram really took off and then women started taking selfies and posting it on Instagram, it was like the best thing ever because like they were so happy and confident with the way that they looked and they wanted to share it with like their community. So it's been amazing for us. And it still is like such a big tool for us. And then there's like the downside of it too, like the Yelp and Twitter has become a little more Yelpy and it's, but I mean, listen, I'm a big believer in like getting feedback wherever you can get feedback and however you can get it because and also when you go in Drybar, which you've never had a blowout, but if you ask any of your girlfriends,
I'm gonna go next time someone I know is going. I just want to go soak in the experience.
Yeah, just go sit there and watch it. But after a woman leaves Drybar, we send an email that's like, hey, we hope you had a great experience. We'd love to know how things went. Please tell us, give it to us, the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, don't hold back. Like, we practically beg them to tell us. And there's like a rating system, and then they can write to us, which, by the way, also diverts them a little bit from feeling like if they are frustrated, that they come right to us versus having to like feel like they have to go rant somewhere else.
For sure.
So that's been a good thing. And generally, like women will tell us, if there's like a little thing that happened or it was great, but it's a great way for us to constantly be getting feedback and being able to like analyze that feedback and be able to like pinpoint it to that stylist. And, if sometimes they're like, oh, that, I felt like the stylist didn't really listen to me. Like that's a coachable moment that we can say to that stylist, like, hey, listen, like you're a great stylist, but we're hearing, some client feedback that you're not really like listening to what the client wants. And like, we all need feedback. And so it comes in a lot of different forms and we pay really close attention to it. So we make sure again, being at the top of your game, you have to pay attention to feedback.
Yeah, I could see how that would be really hard with that many locations. Is there any place where technology in general, like, are you going to do the Postmates of Drybars, or is that anything that's happening or anything exciting?
No, I
in
mean,
that world?
because my mobile business informed Drybar, we did do dry on the fly for a while, which was like going to people's homes. But we found that women preferred to come into the shop and get out of their house or out of their office or whatever. So, you know, we've really created this experience, this like safe haven, get away from your life for 45 minutes that I think women love.
That's great. Where do you go from here?
Well, you know, I just started on my own podcast.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah.
What's the?
So, you know, the reason, and I, you know, that I wanted to do this is because I get approached a lot about a lot of things we've talked about, like how do you raise money, how do you start a successful brand, like how do you know when to scale and partner. I mean, the list goes on and on. Yeah. And I get emails from people all the time, like, can we have coffee for like 20 minutes? I can pick your brain. And I'm like, listen, as much as I would love to do that, like, there's just not enough hours in the day. Yeah. So I was like, you know, I was on a podcast. I don't know if you've ever listened to Guy Raz's How I Built This.
Yeah, of course.
It's a great one, right? And that's a huge one. I was on that podcast probably like 3 years ago, although they've just re-released it. Thank you, NPR.
Yeah, that's great. Was that to help promote your? That's so good.
It was really nice of them because that podcast, I've gotten, and the irony is it's, you know, it's only you listen, but I've gotten stopped more.
I bet.
From that piece of press than I think anything I've ever done. Yep. And it also, that's when I started thinking, I'm like, maybe I should do a podcast because people loved hearing my story. They loved hearing like tidbits of the business and how it started and all the stuff that we've done that I was like, you know, I bet it would be a great like platform for me to be able to like give and advice and talk about like how we grew our business and the things that we've learned and all of this stuff while talking to other entrepreneurs. So I roped my brother and Michael into doing it too because he's more like the business side of things, and we have this like funny banter. We totally disagree. We have very different like life philosophies. So it's been fun. I mean, we've only been recording a couple of months now, but we have a really good time, and we've brought in some really fun people, and we talk about their businesses while we're talking about our businesses. And I do this whole like DM section where I like, if you ask me a question and maybe we'll answer it, you know? Yeah. And it's super fun.
It is cool. And do you want to know what it is? The reason why, because a lot of people say that about after they come on this podcast also, that they get a lot of good feedback. And the reason why is when you build, like you can post on social media, you can do all the stuff that you're supposed to do, but there's something about if people like you enough to listen to you just talk into a microphone with somebody else for an hour and a half, they really feel connected to you. And they really know your mannerisms, and they know, you know what I mean? It's more than just, I like her tweets.
Well, that's the scary part of it too. I mean, we literally just launched, I don't know when this is airing, but we just launched.
It'll be on Wednesday.
Oh, good. Okay. Because we just launched this week, and I'm like, it's like another one of those like starting Drybar, starting the product line. I'm like, does anybody care what I have to say?
Yeah, it sucks in the beginning, but trust me.
It's like
when
I
first started,
weird.
It was like, oh my God, nobody gives a single shit about me talking.
Well, and I've gotten like through my personal social media, like a lot of people who are like, oh my God, I listened to all of the episodes. They were so good. And I learned so many lessons already. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, I just need like millions of people to do that. Because like it's like a pretty competitive thing. So I'm a little like, scared.
But here's the thing is you can't, the same way the Drybar product wouldn't have worked without Drybar, and that's what set you ahead. Your podcast is going to work because nobody can just.
You said it here.
What?
You said it's going to work here.
Yeah, it is going to work.
I'm marking that.
Today we are promoting your podcast. What's it called?
Raising the Bar.
Raising the Bar and Maximum Z. Is the two priorities of this podcast. But it's going to work because you can't, no matter how funny you are, or how whatever anyone is, you can't replicate what you've done and where the knowledge is coming from.
Authenticity of it, you know. I think that, and I also feel like a little bit of this like pull to like, you know, to give back. And I've learned, I mean, I've gotten my college education in the last 8 years. You know, it's like the things that I have learned and the stuff that I know that I don't even like realize that I know from running this business and, you know, from every different angle of it, you know, and I want to share all that. And I think it's the perfect forum, you know, to do that. And not to mention me and my brother are funny together and rag on each other.
You'll kill it.
Yeah.
Because it's also so hot right now to be an entrepreneur. And every young person wants to be one. And like it's just a prime time where entrepreneurs are cooler than ever. I think you're going to.
I know. I mean, I was just on the cover of a magazine. So that tells you
something.
What
were you on the cover of?
Ink. Damn. Isn't that cool?
Really? What was like the title?
How I Built It? Or How I Built It or How I Built This? How I Built It. Which is funny because my brother and my husband are like we all built it together. But they're always like, well, Alli
man.
gets all the glory.
That's good though. You deserve
But
it.
I mean, it was my baby. It's like a good story.
You
I'm
were the
like,
one forcing them to get on the laptop.
Yeah. What's funny is like how much my husband, the branding is all him and that. And I get asked about branding all the time, which I can pretty intelligently talk about because I live with my husband and I've learned so much from him. But we'll be like sometimes at parties or something and somebody will come up to be like, your wife, so smart. You must be so proud of her. And he's always like, oh, I am. Like, she's so smart. And it's like this thing where then he tells me, because I'm like the front man of this business. And, I'm the face of it. And it's just kind of a funny joke
great.
we have internally. And then he's like, yes, she's awesome.
I love her so much.
Sometimes someone said to him, like, you're so lucky, and I was like, oh, good Lord, I'm going to get in so much trouble later.
That's amazing. That's so good.
Funny.
I bet the cover of the Inc. magazine went over well.
Listen, they were pretty proud. And it was one of those things that, like, talk about, like, there aren't even words. I mean, to think of, like, my whole life and all the things that I did to be able to be on the cover of a magazine and a pretty reputable business magazine was, like, pretty like lifetime pinch me like holy fucking shit moment. It was really
a good moment,
big highlight.
Okay,
so how long have you had your podcast?
2 years. Right, 2 years. So here's my advice is, well, I'm guessing that NPR shout out will give you a huge boost from the beginning, but be prepared that in the beginning it's gonna seem like nobody gives a shit. Like, and you're going to be like, oh man, I just wish the numbers were more. And then the growth is very slow because you're asking people to listen to you talking to a microphone for a really long time. And think about what people spend an hour and a half doing. So to take that from something else and give it to you is a lot to ask, right?
Totally.
But as you get them, it does snowball more and more and more and more. And as you get them, they're so loyal and they truly like you and they truly support you. So to lose them, the same way you said about giving the free blowout to a person, to lose them is hard. Like, I'd have to be a pretty big piece of shit or just not podcast for like 2 months to lose them because they actually now are having these conversations with me. So it's worth the slow growth, but just do it. I told myself, I said, I'll do it once a week for a year. If after a year I feel like it wasn't worth it, I'll just quit. It's fine. And I love it. It's great. It's been one of the biggest.
Well, that's how we felt. We love it and we think that, it'll take time for people to discover us and all that. But I mean, we just launched. We don't even have like our first numbers yet, because I've been noticing now on people's like Instagram pages, like 1.5 million downloads. And I was like, well, shit, that's a lot of downloads.
That's a shit
like,
ton.
where do you get the downloads?
You're going to get it. You're going to get it. Here's my final big question. If you could go back in time to Florida,
I'm never going back to Florida.
And you just sort of...
Just kidding. I love Florida.
And you can just sort of float up behind little young Alli, right? Maybe middle school. Maybe she's a little insecure or just shy. But hungry and sort of wondering what her life's going to become. If you could tell yourself anything to take a little bit of the pointless worry or some of the, maybe you wasted a lot of time over something that wasn't worth it, what would you tell yourself now?
Well, I would say that I would tell myself, not to like stress that it's all going to work out, but I didn't really stress. I was not that kid. That was my brother. He was the stress case. I was more of like, I always felt like everything was going to work out one way or the other. I think more for me once I got into like my 20s and I was living in New York City and all my friends were in college and everybody was on this more traditional path and I was like out in New York City by myself, not knowing anybody and like didn't feel very good about myself. I think at that point in my life, is when I really questioned and doubted myself and was like, oh shit. Like, oh my God, like what am I going to do now? And I think that I wished I had, and maybe it was because I grew up a little more quiet and like not knowing what I was going to do. I had wished I had like the confidence and like, that I have now back then that to know that it was all going to work out. But I don't know how you'd ever have that in your 20s. I think that's part of what your 20s. I remember my mom always saying that her 30s were like the year that she was like, I don't really care what people think anymore. I'm just going to be me kind of mentality. And I don't think I had that totally in my 30s. I think became more like and that's come maybe in my late 30s and into my early 40s where I feel like pretty good about who I am.
Yeah. You know what else I love about your story is, just quickly, sorry, is that you were 32 or 33 with kids in LA before you even started this thing. And I just think a lot of people, I think social media is helping this because you're able to see the truth a little more.
Yeah, totally.
But I think that a lot of people like hit 28 and they're like, it's over for me.
Yeah.
You know, the whole dream phase, the whole start a new business thing. That's really cool about your story.
Yeah, no, I know. And I think that was like, you know, that whole like, trust your path, trust your, you know, that's where I'm like a big believer in like, do what you need to do to make yourself happy in the moment, you know, and don't worry about, of course you want to plan and think and, you know, plan for your future. But I also think there's a part of you that's like, you know, for me, it was like, all I could think about was wanting to have kids. And I wasn't like, I didn't care about a career then. I just didn't, you know? And I feel like if that's how you feel now, or if right now you feel like I don't want to have kids, all I care about is my career, then kids can come later and that's okay too. You know, I think it's this like, to your point, I do think social media helps show that off, that there's like a lot of different ways you can do it.
Really cool. Well, thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me. This
incredible.
Was fun.
Yeah.
I told you I'm like a talker.
You're a natural. You just you made my job so easy.
Oh, good.
You crushed it.
Thank you
so much. Everyone go check out Alli's podcast. Is there anyone else you want to send people?
Well,
obviously Drybar is everywhere.
Yes,
There's
Drybar,
5,000 locations coming soon.
5,000 locations, one near you. No, go listen to my podcast. We have really cool people on. We should have you on.
I would love to.
That'd be so fun.
Anytime.
Yeah, awesome.
Let's do it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Guys, if you like that and you want to see more like it, as well as vlogs, other web series, and all the random stuff that I'm doing here on YouTube, don't forget to click that subscribe button. You won't regret it, I promise.